When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
The Flushing Girl from Flushing, the nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.
Hello, and welcome to Oh, Mr. Sheffield, a podcast about The Nanny, a hit sitcom from the 90s starring Fran Drescher. This week, we are talking about Season 5, Episode 10 from Flushing with Love. As always, I am Sean DePasquale, here with...
Toria Sheffield, but is it episode 10 or is it episode 9? Am I wrong? Let me see.
It's episode 10.
What? Hold on a second.
Uh-oh, we're off to a bad start, ladies and gentlemen.
Hold on. Season 5.
Episode 9 we recorded last week. I'm literally looking at it.
Oh my God.
Oh no.
My God.
Tori, did you watch the wrong episode?
Nope. I watched episode 10. I just mislabeled the number. Okay. We're back on track.
All right. So from Flushing with Love, Season 5, Episode 10. Interestingly, this one is got a story by Sean Hanley, Jay Amernick, and Dan Amernick, and then a teleplay by Jay and Dan Amernick. And of course, directed by Dorothy Lyman. So a lot of hands went into this episode, which means it's probably the greatest episode of The Nanny ever, right?
And so you said story by and then teleplay by, right? So three people created the plot and then two people wrote it down and then committed it to paper. Okay.
Yeah, it seems like Jay and Dan are probably like writing partners, right? So it's like, it's not like it took like two writing partners and an extra guy came up with the story. And then the two writing partners went off and scripted the episode.
And this is the episode, by the way, where Fran takes takes the whole Sheffield family to her family reunion at Niagara Falls because she's hoping it will inspire him to propose. But I will say that's not really all that happens because that happens a little more than halfway through the episode. But
I actually clocked it. They get to Niagara Falls with exactly 4 minutes left in the episode.
Interesting. Okay.
Isn't that weird? It's so weird. I was like, wait, what? And I looked at the time and it was 4 minutes left till the credits.
Yeah. They haven't done this in a while. Remember they used to do this in the first season a lot? But so this episode begins in the foyer of the mansion and Niles and Fran are talking and Niles says that his butler's glee club is this coming weekend and he needs to request some time off, which made me chuckle.
Yes.
And Fran's like, no, like I need to request time off this weekend. It's the Fine family reunion in Niagara Falls. And they go back and forth for a minute. And then Niles is like, no. Okay. He's like, it's okay. I don't need to go. You take your time. I'll just stay home, and watch the kids in the house. And she starts heading upstairs. And as soon as her back is turned, he like bolts towards Mr. Sheffield's office because he was clearly just lulling her into a false sense of security so that he could ask for time off first and screw her over. And then in this thing that they're kind of doing more and more this season, which I really like, he swings the door open and she is already sitting on Mr. Sheffield's desk. Yeah. Like inhumanly fast and impossible rather.
It's very funny. It's very funny that they're embracing like cartoon physics this season.
Yes, that's exactly what it is because she totally knew what he was up to. And he also had a funny line in the previous scene where when she says she's going to the family reunion, he's like, I didn't know you had any family left. I thought they all lived in my kitchen. But so, Fran's sitting on Mr. Sheffield's desk. And even though they're both requesting time off, she's like tickling his ear and stroking his arm and basically like using sex appeal to definitely get the upper hand. And, Mr. Sheffield totally buys into it. And he's like, oh, Niles. He's like, well, I think one of them is like, Niles, you did just take a month off. And he's like, I was recovering from a heart attack.
Yeah.
and Fran's like, how you budget your vacation time is your business. So cruel. But
yeah, one of my first notes is, why is Maxwell such a dick about Niles recovering from his heart attack? Like, what the fuck?
Because they're all such babies. And so Fran gets the time off, and Niles is rightfully incensed because this is just not fair. No. Like the way that she went about getting it would be incredibly frustrating if you were working in this household. Yeah. And so in the next scene, Niles, he kind of storms into the kitchen and he's still really angry. And he actually does, and Fran's sort of like, what? You're still upset about that? And then he's like, he does this really good impression of her where he sits up on the kitchen table and starts like wiggling up on it with his leg crossed. And he's like, oh, hi, Mr. Sheffield. Do you mind if I dust your desk with my tuchus?
It was the best line. I thought it was so funny because it's so true.
It's so true. And then, but she's like, you don't mind when I use my body to get you things you want, like a new vacuum. And they just kind of like hurl insults at each other. And then she like runs upstairs and they're like kind of in a tiff. And then Cece comes in and just at the end of this fight, and she's like very intrigued by this dynamic because like she's never seen them fight before. And, he's just like, oh, like it's just so infuriating. She has Mr. Sheffield wrapped around her finger. And Cece is like, yeah, like, where have you been, man? Like, I've been saying this for 4 years. And then she's like, you know what? Like, I think maybe we've been on like the wrong team. Like, I think we should form an alliance. And Niles is like, basically pinky swear, like, okay, like now we're a team and we're against Fran. And while I was intrigued by this new dynamic, I was also a little betrayed. Even though Fran kind of had it coming this episode, like I was like, Niles, no.
Yeah, agreed.
And then it started, this starts a montage to the song, Why Can't We Be Friends? Like, why can't we be friends? And it's basically a montage of Niles and Cece, like, attempting to sabotage Fran at every turn. Like Niles gives everyone in the family huge pieces of carrot cake and like gives Fran a carrot. And then like he destroys all her lipsticks. She like can't, like, he's cut them all off, which is like, wow, that's vicious. Like
it's so silly, but it's so funny that they go to war with Fran over this.
Yeah.
Also every single week since it sucks that like an aspect of the show that was ruined for me from the beginning was the knowledge that Cece and Niles would get together, because anytime they have scenes together, my note is always, is this the beginning of their romance? And it never is. And I realize now, like, it just like retrospectively, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Like, this might be the most anticipated upcoming storyline for me because I asked this at least once an episode.
Yes. And then I think, like, this would have been so fun to watch if we didn't know it was leading to anything. Like, just this, like, random one-off. And it actually, this, like, my favorite part of the montage where, Niles and Cece are sitting at the kitchen table and they're just, like, laughing uproariously at the funny page in the comics, which is funny because, like, nobody ever actually laughs out loud at comics.
No.
And Fran sees them and she comes over and she like puts a hand on both their shoulder and she leans in to join them and they just like get stony faced. They put the paper down and they walk away. And so then she sits down and tries to start reading the comics on her own and she starts to laugh and chuckle, but it just devolves into her sobbing. Like her shoulders are like shaking with sobs because she's so sad that she's like being rejected by Niles and Cece. And it was just very funny. And then we cut to a scene with Dr. Miller. I do love how Dr. Miller is sort of a staple now of this show.
Me too. He's like the like third set like location, like it's like Sylvia's house, the main house, and the doctor's office.
Yeah. I'm like, what a like little jackpot for like an actor where you're like, oh yeah, you're gonna get cast on this sitcom. Like, they mostly do one-offs, and it's like, oh no, actually, you're gonna be in like 10 episodes this season. I loved this because I thought it rang very true to what like can sometimes happen with people who like are attempting to better themselves, or even though this isn't really the case with Fran in this situation, but she goes to Dr. Miller's office and she sits down and, she seems really cheerful. And she's like, Dr. Miller, I think I'm starting to no longer need therapy. I feel like I've really grown and I truly like myself as a person now. And he's like, okay, well, what's the problem? And then she just sobs. She's like, everybody else hates me, which is like very funny.
Yes, it's very Fran.
Yep. And then she starts to explain that like, oh, Niles is accusing me of like using my sensuality.
This was so funny too. She's like, Miles says I use my sensuality to manipulate men. And then she like slowly and sexily like wraps her lips around a strawberry and slowly bites into it and like sensually drags her like mouth across the surface of the strawberry and then leans back, and they mimic the very famous shot from The Graduate. Of Mrs. Robinson leaning back and putting her leg up and like sexily like sitting kind of like not like spread, but like one leg out and the other leg kind of like bent up in her little dress. and she's not playing any of this like sexually like in like the way she's acting or looking. It's just like she does a really good job here, Fran, because she really sells it like she's accidentally doing all of this.
Well, I read it more as she knows what I actually had this question. I was like, do you think that she's trying to get Dr. Miller to agree with her by using her body? No. You don't think she realized?
No, I don't think she realizes. Oh, that's so funny. You read it as she knows what she's doing and she's asking for it.
Yeah. The basic. No, that I read it as she's like, me, Dr. Miller, I would never do anything like that, right? And I assumed it was her trying to get him to be like, you're so right, Fran. But she thought she could like wrap a finger around him.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I guess I didn't go there because I feel like what would that gain her in therapy?
I mean, just the validation. But I was going to say,
the validation.
I know people that they literally just like go to therapy to get someone to agree with their narrative.
Oh, I know someone like that too.
Hey, do we know the same person? No. Wait, I know multiple people like that.
I was just to say, I don't think we're thinking of the same person, but we definitely know the same person.
But hey, listeners, if you we will do a special paid for episode where we'll tell you our secret.
Yeah. Be sure to check out the extended episode on our Patreon where we tell you all the people in our lives that we think are insane.
But so that happens in therapy, and then the next scene is we cut back to the mansion. Fran walks into the kitchen where Niles is. And oh no, sorry. I cut ahead. We cut back to the mansion and we're in the kitchen, and Niles and Cece are like getting along famously. Like it turns out they're now in a pottery class together. He's like, see you later, sweetheart. And she's like, toodles. And it's so much so that Mr. Sheffield sees this and he's like very disturbed by it. He like walks out and he's like, something's wrong.
Is it his line or is it Fran's where they go, it's a world gone mad? Which I just thought.
She says it's a world. His line was like, okay, Mulder and Scully, like explain this X file to me, and walks out when he sees them getting along. And then no, Fran had this great, it was her, because then Fran comes in and Cece's already left at this point, but she's like, you know what, Niles? She's like, we need to talk. I just spent my whole session at Dr. Miller's talking about how you've been ignoring me and playing yo-yo with my feelings. And that time could have been much better spent talking about how Mr. Sheffield does that. That was a great line. And then she's like, you're hanging out with Miss Babcock, da-da-da. And then she's like, it's a world gone mad. And he kind of relents finally at this point. And he's like, you're being ridiculous. You should just invite Mr. Sheffield and the children to your weekend in Niagara Falls. He's like, then we'll both get what we want. Like I can go away and like, it's an engagement hotspot. Like millions of people, he has some like statistic where tons of people get engaged in Niagara Falls every year. And I wrote, weird that this plot line emerged over halfway through the episode. That was
and also it's weird. The pacing is weird, but also I kept thinking, is there going to be some twist here where this is part of Niles and Cece's plan for Fran? And no, it's not. Niles just like decides to stop working with Cece and just tell Fran to go to Niagara Falls. Like it was such a weird shift that I really spent the rest of the episode waiting for the reveal of like, oh, this was all. But like they just dropped that storyline. It's just like, nope, that storyline is over. And now he even says that at one point. Niles goes, I don't know why I teamed up with Cece. Like as if the writers were like, we don't know why we just spent half the episode doing that, but now here's the other half of the episode.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess I was less bothered from a character perspective because I do feel like at a certain point he would just level with Fran. Like it's kind of when you're kind of annoyed and you're being petty, but at a certain point you're like, oh, okay, this is nonsense. Like let's get to the heart of it. Like you're kind of like I could see their dynamic, their friendship playing out like this, where he just had to have his tantrum basically. But regardless, I agree that the halfway through the episode was. As we said, we haven't seen this in a long time, but I was like, oh, like this again. But so anyway, so Niles suggests that, and Fran is like, Niles, you're a genius. And she's like, now we can both go away. And you don't have to be friends with Miss Babcock anymore. And then he said, his line was, I don't know what I was doing in that unholy alliance. And this is like one of my favorite lines of the episode. She goes, I know. It was like Yogi dumping Boo Boo for the Ranger. And I just lulled at the idea that like the best metaphor she can think of for them is Yogi Bear and Boo Boo, who are like a couple of idiots. I just love it.
I wrote that line down. That is also like probably my favorite line in the whole episode. I thought that was so fun. It was such a funny line.
Yep. And then the next scene has Fran running into the kitchen while people are just running in all the time in this episode, coming into the kitchen while the kids are eating lunch. She has a severe bob haircut wig. And I wrote, it's really incredible that she can pull it off because that's not easy to do. Like, she looks great in this little short French chic bob. But then she's like, kids, pack your bags. We're going to Niagara Falls and your father and I are getting married. And they're all like, oh my God, like he proposed? And she's like, no. And then one of them's like, does he know we're going? And she's like, no. And then they all just start gathering their plates while mumbling like, oh, she's really pathetic. This is just a step too far. Like this is so sad. And I just love that like even now the children are like wise to the fact that it's just such a pathetic situation. And the kids leave like sort of disgusted with Fran. And then Sylvia comes in and she's like so excited for the trip. She's like, the last time I was at Niagara Falls was when your father proposed. He had no intention of asking me, but he had just gone to get me a bromo for my morning sickness, which is funny. Clearly he proposed because she was pregnant. And then
we see Morty only from the back.
Yes, we do. We see it from the back.
We get a Morty appearance.
Well, and Sylvia's also super excited by the plan because she's like, if you get married there, like it's a free wedding.
Oh yeah, she goes, this is the kind of wedding mothers dream of. Free.
And then Fran goes into Mr. Sheffield's office to basically be like, please come on this trip with us. And it was so sad because Cece and Niles are there and Cece still thinks that she and Niles are friends. And she makes them, barb at Fran. And he, instead of, tossing one at Fran as well, he says something mean to Cece. And she's like, I thought we were a team now, bud.
Yeah, she gets so deflated. It's really funny.
It's so sad. She just wants a friend.
It is endearing.
Yes. And he goes, it was what it was. And now it's over. She's like, she basically like Charlie Brown's out of the room. And Fran, she's like, Mr. Sheffield, I was thinking about it. Like, El Nino's coming and it's going to flood the entire city. So you should just come to Niagara Falls with me and the family. And he actually says, his line is, I'd rather eat leeches and bleed to death from the inside out. And I just wrote dark. What a line.
Oh my God, what a line. I had the same reaction. I was like, holy cow. Grim.
But then she already has, anticipated this. So she opens the office door and the children are there. And she's like, let's ask them what they think. And she's like, kids, do you want to go to Niagara Falls? And they're all like, yippee! Like, ooh, finally, we get to go to Niagara Falls. And he's like, oh, well, he's like, I guess I'm outnumbered. I guess we'll go to Niagara Falls. And then I just realized no, they're not really at Niagara Falls. No, I was going to Google it. But I was like, I don't think I actually needed to.
You don't have to do that. They definitely were not. I mean, in fact, my note is, oh, cool, a whole sequence shot on green screen.
Yes.
Because it's clearly green screen.
And lots of B-roll of the falls. So we are on the Maid of the Mist, which is these famous boats at Niagara Falls called the Maid of the Mist, which Sean, have you ever been?
To Niagara Falls?
Yeah, to like the Maid of
No.
Have you been on the Maid of the Mist? Okay, so
No, I've never been to the falls. I don't know why. I guess I just never made it that way.
I just never wanted to. I guess that's fair if you're like, I just never wanted to.
I guess I went to a waterfall in my family. When I was younger, we went to Jamaica and we went to this like giant waterfall there, I think called like Dunn's Rivers Falls or something. And like you can like ride the waterfall down. There's like a slide, like a natural slide that they like carved into like the waterfall. And so like after that experience, I think I just was like, all right, well, I've seen a waterfall.
So I've been to the falls a few times now. And I mean, I have to say it is truly like a wonder of nature. And just even the idea of someone riding down the falls, like you'd be instantly dead. Like it is so intensely huge.
Yeah, but people go down it in barrels.
I know. Sometimes they walk over it in tight ropes. It's insane. But basically the Maid of the Mist, it's like a boat that people go on, like tourists, and it takes you kind of as close to the falls as you can safely get to. And because they are coming, the water is coming down at such a tremendous rate and hitting the water, it actually creates mist. So you're not even like that close to the falls, but you're getting completely damp and soaked. And that's why, and it's kind of like a fun experience. You expect to go and get soaked, and like a lot of people propose and get engaged. I think even Jim and Pam on The Office, that's how they got married. I feel like it was something like that.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. I think it was a waterfall episode.
Yeah. But so Fran and Mr. Sheffield are on the Maid of the Mist with like all of the Fine family. But we get some fun little like beats with random cousins and aunts, and they're all like very annoying. And Mr. Sheffield
I really liked I want to pitch you my play. And Mr. Sheffield goes, okay. And they go, it takes place in Connecticut. And then there's this long silence. And Mr. Sheffield goes, and then they go, you're not bringing anything to this party. like they wanted him to finish the pitch.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because then Fran comes up and she's like, that's like Aunt so-and-so. And she's like, did you hear her pitch? Almost as if like Fran also thought it was a great idea.
No, but even funnier, she goes, did you hear about her play in Connecticut?
Yeah. Like the Fine family thinks it's genius, clearly. And then what happens is, so Fran, we kind of haven't fully set this up or established it. She is convinced that this is going to be a magical moment. There's sort of this, this myth. It's almost like the magic of the falls, and people almost can't help themselves when they're there, and they like are compelled to propose and get married. So she is like, even though there's no indication from Mr. Sheffield's side that like he is ready for that step, that he had any intention of taking that step, Fran has it in her head that like this is where it's going to happen. In a sort of sitcom-y logic way, where she gets something in her head and like that's the way it is. But so everyone else on this boat are in these like sort of disposable ponchos that you get when you're on the Maid of the Mist, but she refuses to wear it because she thinks she's about to get proposed to. So she's in this white kind of fabulous ensemble, and they get close to the falls. And she's like, oh, we're getting close. Mr. Sheffield, come over here. And there's actually this really funny beat though, where for a second he's like, oh, Miss Fine, look how close we're getting. Let's show the children. And he grabs this small figure and he goes, Gracie, sweetheart, look. And it's just a tiny old woman. And he screams. He's like, the way that he screams in terror, like really made me laugh.
It felt like a Simpsons joke. It was so funny. I loved that. I love this beat because he goes like, whoa.
It was also very like Austin Powers-esque. Like you don't see that comedy that much anymore. But then she like drags him over to like sort of the front of the ship I know there's an actual name for that. The bow? I don't know.
The bow.
I don't know ships. I know there's a
The
poop
bow.
deck. But she's
But
like,
it's not what you think.
oh no, I made a huge mistake on my cruise. No,
Oh, Toria, no.
But so basically she, drags him over there, and they play on the fact that like you get very damp on the Maid of the Mist by, instead of it just being misty, they're literally getting like buckets of water, like just tossed on them. And it's really way more intense than Fran anticipated. So she can't even hear a thing at this point. Like she's like almost getting knocked on her feet. But he's like, oh my gosh, Miss Fine, like the majesty, the splendor. It's like flooding me with emotion. And he's like, Miss Fine, will you marry me? And she literally doesn't even hear it because there's so much.
It's like so loud, and there's like so much like what do you call it? Like there's like, I guess it's like mist and like the sound of the falls, and like there's water splashing all over them, and
it's like very intense.
Very chaotic. Yeah.
And when she comes over and she's like, what did you say? And he's like about to say it again, but then he like the ship sort of like there's a bump and he falls backwards and onto the floor.
And like I've never been to Niagara Falls, but I can tell you, even as someone who's never been, I went, this is not what it's like.
No, it's
like,
not what it's
what
like.
Is happening?
It is not. That would be a very scary, unusual Maid of the Mist voyage, I will say.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
And so this, needless to say, this does not go to plan for Fran. And then the episode ends with, I wrote what would technically be a super concerning detail, but it is just played for laughs. And that is that we find out Mr. Sheffield has hit his head so hard that he does not remember the trip at all.
Yes.
So he does not remember he proposed. And perhaps more medically troubling, he thinks he's the butler of the house. And I'm like, has nobody taken him to a doctor? Or maybe this does happen. Maybe they took him to a doctor and they're like, he'll be a little confused for a few days, but it will wear off. So just go with it.
It's so weird. He thinks he's the butler.
Yes. And Niles and Fran are letting him because it means he's doing the housework.
But you also, you know what? There's you glossed over an exchange, but I guess I'll save it for favorite lines and moments because we've said a lot of my favorite lines already.
Okay, and then
then there's a really weird credit scene.
Fran, but basically Fran's like, we really should tell him. But then Niles goes, but he thinks he's fooling around with the nanny. And then Fran's like, you know what? And she turns to Mr. Sheffield and she's like, you've worked hard enough today. We should rest. And like takes him upstairs to the bedroom. Yeah. And then, and then in the next scene, they're coming back down the stairs and he's like, oh, Miss Fine, thank goodness I remembered who I was before I let that go too far. And she's like, looks super disappointed.
Yeah.
She was going to fully take advantage of him.
Yes.
And then,
which is horrific in its own way.
I wrote, it's the movie Overboard.
Yes, it is. It's the movie Overboard, which is a very problematic movie.
I know.
Think about it. It's a great movie.
Then, I know, such a shame.
So what was your interpretation of what this credits beat was?
That her aunt, there was this joke throughout the episode that her Aunt Cookie plays the spoons on her boobs. Like she has spoons and she taps them on her boobs and makes songs. And then, so she was playing a song for the whole Sheffield family and they were amazed. I just thought she was playing the spoons, but on her boobs. I don't know. Is there something
No, I
else?
just didn't get, I must have missed that joke. I must have missed that running gag because I was just like, what is this?
Really? Oh no, they made reference to it like twice in the episode.
I may have completely
That's
missed
so
it.
interesting. You must have been checked out.
Well, I did get hit by a car recently.
That's
so.
true. That is true. We can put that in trivia.
Yeah, we'll put that in trivia. All right. Well, on that was an episode. So I guess it's time for segments.
And now, segments.
So, segments.
Yeah, no, I think we should move on to segments.
To say we can move on to our segments.
And now, segments.
Segments with Sean and Toria.
Segments. First up, favorite lines and moments. I'll start.
I'll finish. I'll follow. Sorry.
At the end of the episode, Fran is like, clearly she's talking to Val and she like did not hear Mr. Sheffield ask her to marry him. And she like kind of relays the whole story to Val, and Val goes, this is such a good bit. Val goes, well, Fran, you know what they say. And then again, there's like another long beat, and Fran goes, what? And Val goes, you know what they say, Fran, you're far more the sophisticate than I.
I had that exact line as my first line. You're far more the sophisticate than I.
Holy shit, is that a good... First of all, the whole, like, I could dissect that joke for like hours. Like, first the setup of just like, you know what they say, and then like what? And like then being like, no, you know what they... Like, it could have just ended there and it's like a funny chuckle, but then you're far more the sophisticate than I. It's such a weird... it's such a like uniquely specific, weird way of phrasing that. It's so good. So good. Maybe my favorite Nanny line ever.
And it was very like, it harkened back also to a very classic golden age of comedy where there really was a set them up, knock them down, and then like character specific, it's definitely not like a Laurel and Hardy, but it kind of is. Like, it was so good.
Yeah.
So good. Well, it's funny because that scene has my next favorite moment, which is just that Fran brings Val a gift from Niagara Falls, and she's like, I brought you something, and it's Niagara Falls corn cob holders. And Val's genuine, like, she's like marveling at it. She goes, oh my God, look at the detail work. And then Frank goes, yeah, put it away for special. They were
for special,
like to be so so amazed by like the detail work of these gaudy corn on the cob holders, like, killed me.
Yeah, so good. And then just the shorthand of like, put it away for special, meaning like for special occasions.
Yep.
What else? Oh, Niles and Cece start teaming up, and they're like really getting along with each other, and they like clink cups of coffee. And Cece's like, you made the coffee great this morning. And Niles goes, actually, it's the first time I put your coffee in a clean cup.
Yep. I loved
so gross.
It was. Well, we also know that he puts a dirty sock in her margarita. I'm sorry, in her, not margaritas, her. Oh my God.
What is the drink?
Why? Oh my God.
It's not,
I keep wanting to say cocktail, but it's, it has olives in it. No, it's a classy drink with olives and gin, sometimes vodka.
Shaken, not
dirty
stirred.
martini, a martini.
Yeah.
Oh God, we got to stop drinking in the morning.
Well, I mean, I'm not a drinker, so that one was out of my. That was like trying to come up with the name of a football player. I was like going to be no help to you.
I love this line where when Fran goes to Dr. Miller and starts talking about Niles, he goes, Niles, and he looks at his notes and he goes, Nosy Yenta Butler. And then we basically already covered so many of my others.
Same. Mind if I dust your desk with my tuchus? This is very funny. Also, Niles says to Fran at one point, I can only imagine how long it took you to find something skimpy. There's a 3-second scavenger hunt. It's like so catty. Good stuff.
Yeah. Any others?
No, let's close up favorite lines and moments.
Okay, we're closing the kitchen. The kitchen is closed. So now we're going on to Yiddish. There was took us with the line you just mentioned.
Yep.
There's
Took
also
us.
yenta with the line I just mentioned, which, as we know, a yenta it's a noun for it's a name of a woman that has become a word for a nosy person in Yiddish.
Yes. Yeah.
And okay, Nanny
It's like
trivia.
the Yiddish version. It's like the Yiddish version of Karen.
Yes, like it doesn't. It's as we've discussed this before. It doesn't have the same like meaning as Karen because Karen's like the woman that wants to speak to the manager, but it is the same thing where like a name became like a noun,
A verb. Or a
an
noun.
adjective.
Yeah.
I don't know. She's such a
I don't
Karen.
know.
I guess a name is a noun, but it became a different kind of noun.
Yeah.
But so for Nanny trivia, Sean getting hit by a car was a little prescient.
This episode is probably going to come out 4 weeks from when we're recording it. So I guess anything could have happened in that time. Although I suspect, I'm willing to make this prediction now that as of you listening to this episode upon its release, the writer's strike is still happening.
Yes, and a little context for that. And by the way, in our timeline, in our reality, like it's it's been about a week since the writers' strike started, and it's
been 1 week. Yeah,
it's been 1 week, and so it's for writers in the industry to just make fair wages for their work. First of all, we might live in a little bit of a bubble and an echo chamber, so a lot of people outside of this industry might not be as aware as why this is an issue.
Okay, so to give some context to this whole thing, the Writers Guild of America, East and West, it's a guild, it's a union essentially that was formed ages and ages ago in Hollywood to protect writers in the same way that SAG-AFTRA is an actors guild and the Directors Guild protects directors. Essentially, collective bargaining, right? It works, especially when you're bargaining against such powerful players as the people that are behind the studios in Hollywood's, talking about billions and billions of dollars at their fingertips. And so every 3 years, the, contracts with the guild and the producers studios expires and they need to renegotiate. And this year is a real inflection point because there are a lot of issues on the tables that writers are concerned about, specifically regarding streaming and the way studios and streaming services have sort of used streaming as a way to skirt around the pretty clearly established rules that were in place for television writing.
I just want to very, very quickly interject because I want to jump back for like 2 sentences to give an even more macro context for this, which is I think a lot of people outside the industry assume that television writers or people who work or writers are rich. And a lot of people are actually it's struggling from paycheck to paycheck because they're not just getting enough to be compensated, right? Some people, this whole thing, they might be like, well, why are we talking about this? Why are we getting into the weeds about it? But so that's this jumping off point for everything Sean is saying.
Yes. And I will, I think it's important to give that even more context, which is regarding what the asks are. So, the short version is that to write for film or TV, at one point was a career. Yes, it is very hard to break into the industry. It's hard to get your foot in the door. But once in the door, there were pretty clear, although there have been less protections in general overall for feature writers. For television writers, there has been a pretty clearly established path to having a career. You get in as a writer, an episodic writer, and then you work your way up in television when you see like producer, executive producer, associate producer, all of those things. Those are titles that writers get because in order to have a career, you start as like a baby writer and you get maybe, in the room and then you get to write or, co-write an episode. And then the next season you get to write your own episode and then you're writing multiple episodes. And each time you're getting a pay bump and you're getting a title bump and you're getting more responsibility. Writers typically go to set with the episode that that they've written and produce on set, meaning they're there to answer questions, they're to do rewrites, they're there to talk to the actors, the director, and sort of interpret what the script is and what the writer's room and the showrunner wants, right? And this gave the writer experience to then go on and sell their own shows and become their own showrunners. With the advent, and that is how, outside of the Aaron Sorkins or the Joss Whedons, the people whose names you know as writers, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people whose names you don't know who just go from show to show and get staffed in a room and contribute and then move on to the next thing. In the last 5-6 years, even 10 years, I would say, since the advent of streaming and sort of the proliferation of streaming, these norms have slowly been whittled away by studios and producers in an effort to save them money. Essentially, they now write less episodes. They're now ordering less episodes, which means there's less time for a writer to be on a show. So where you used to have a job for 6 to 8 months, now you have a job for 3 months. Where you used to get residuals on the episodes that you wrote because those shows would then get sold and played as reruns. Now the studios that own these shows put them on their streaming services and say, well, we don't really have to pay you because we're not selling them anywhere. So they're just living in perpetuity and we own them. So the ways in which writers depended on bringing in income in between gigs, because sometimes there are people who get a job, they write on a show, they get one episode, they get a fee for that episode, and then they don't work for a year and a half. And so that fee, which, sure, it sounds like a lot, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, which then they lose 20 to 30% of to all of the various managers and agents and lawyers that they need to have to work in this business, then they have to live off of that money for a year till their next gig. And they're not, the income's not being supplemented elsewhere. And then there's other concerns, AI is a big concern, and the studios have made it pretty clear that they intend in some way, shape, or form on using that to cheaply generate content that then they completely own the rights to, and then maybe, hiring out writers to just rewrite that. They essentially seem to be trying to turn what was once a career into a gig economy. And it's a scary time for writers at the very top and at the very bottom, and even for people like Tori and I who are not in the Writers Guild yet, but would like to be and would like to have a viable career once we've made our way into that guild. So it's in everybody's best interest, if this is what you're into, to be there and to support this fight. And as such, I have been on the picket line every day since this started because I also believe in this, and I think it's an important cause, and I support unions in general, but certainly the union for what I want to do. I actually have the credits to join the Writers Guild, but there's it's a consistency work thing for me, and paying the fee to get in, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm also planning a wedding right now, so it's not there, but I could be in, and I want to be in, and so protecting it and giving the writers the best deal is very much in my interest. And so I was at a protest or a strike, and I got we were picketing, and a man hit me with his car. Very, I'm fine. I'm not injured physically. I had a little, knee issue for a day or so, but it was more a man got mad that he couldn't make his right hand turn out of the Universal Studios lot and drove into me and a crowd of people. I saw him coming and kind of moved back and hit the hood of his car to be like, yo, dude, there's people here. And then he gave us the finger and he pushed into the crowd again with his car, and the guy behind me also got nudged in the leg and kind of stumbled back, and then we kind of moved out of this guy's way, and he sped off, and got a picture of his license plate, and we'll see if we can hold this guy accountable. But so that was what all of that was about. I am alive and home and safe and sound, and hopefully we find this man and he can be held accountable for this unhinged behavior.
And I'll also, first of all, it's insane that someone would do that. We were talking about this earlier. It's just, there's just zero, even there's just zero excuse. But another thing that I think sometimes is a little maybe confusing or something that people think when they're really outside the industry. I might even have thought this once where it's like, well, people are choosing to do a creative career. Like they're, well, that's going to come with risk, or not obviously the risk of getting hit by a car, but that's going to come with some financial insecurity, or, there's two sides to every coin. Like if you choose not to be an accountant or a lawyer, then like you're kind of accepting the risk of sometimes having to scrounge for money, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is like, it is a job, and you are providing a service that people need, and people make a lot of money off the concepts that writers generate. And they are not getting even a like reasonable or moderate percentage of the profits people are making off of their work. So, I think, it's like, if you've been maybe on social media or looking at this, it's basically like the writers make like 2% of the overall they are 2% of the budget of the profits rather, or of these projects usually. So it's just squeezing people for work that they're demanding.
Well, I mean, it's undervaluing what could arguably be considered the most crucial part of anything in the entertainment industry, which is the idea, right? Like, sure, actors are great and they look good and they're charming and they're the face of things, but ask any actor worth their salt and they will tell you that without words to read and characters to become, they don't have anything to do. I mean, even Fran, and we'll tie this now back to the Nanny, Fran and Peter and all of the writers that we mention every week, like they wrote this stuff. They created it. There would be no Nanny. There would be no funny lines. There would be no Niles without writers. The actors did not create these characters. The actors do not improvise what they say. They are created by writers, by talented people who put a lot of time and effort into making stuff that people love. And I think that the undervaluing of that is really disheartening, because to not feel like these studios understand that like they would not have franchises without people to create them. Even going back to Marvel, it's like removing the movies. These characters all exist because of writers. So Fran now, who straddles the line between being a writer, I would probably venture to say she's probably in the guild because she's written a lot of TV, and being SAG.
Yeah. So as we, Fran Drescher is the current president of SAG-AFTRA, which is the sort of like the Actors Guild, like the union for actors. Fran Drescher on April 30th, 2023 released a statement as president of SAG-AFTRA. And she says, just as unity and solidarity among our members is the ultimate source of our power as a union, standing together with our sister unions multiplies our power and gives us all the strongest position to ensure our large corporate employers step up and treat fairly and justly the people who are the creative source of the industry's success. SAG-AFTRA's national board has adopted a resolution of strong support for the Writers Guild of America in their negotiations with the AMPTP. If the WGA finds it necessary to strike in order to achieve a fair deal for their members, although SAG-AFTRA cannot presently go on strike with them, we will be there to support and stand beside them. We know you likely have questions surrounding the details of the potential strike that was recently approved by the WGA membership, blah, 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 blah. But she's like, we put together a list of answers. And so I'm actually, I'm unclear why I guess SAG-AFTRA is just like too risky for them to do this. Cause I know a lot of other other unions are not crossing the picket line.
Okay, so here's how it works. And then I know we're running long, so I'll we can wrap up this trivia after this. But basically, so IATSE, which is another union, and the Teamsters, which is another union. So the Teamsters have in their contract that they will not cross picket lines. That is just part of, if you're going to work and hire Teamsters union, that if there's a picket line somewhere where they're supposed to drive, they will not drive through it. The other unions do not have that in their contracts. And so because they are still under contract, they are not allowed to breach contract by going on strike. The writers' union's contract expired May 1st, which is why they're all on strike without any kind of breach, because there is no contract right now. That is what the negotiation's about. Now, June 1st, the Directors Guild, the DGA, and SAG-AFTRA, their contracts with the studios also expire, and they will begin negotiations. At that point, theoretically, they will be able to join the Writers Guild on strike if they want. The hope is that SAG and the DGA also choose to go on strike in order to strengthen the collective bargaining of all three unions and really make the studios come to the table with some serious offers and discussions, because so far they have not been taking the writers very seriously. And on that note, I think we should move on.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for, we'll get off our soapboxes. Any support that you can give, you can check my personal Twitter feed at Sean Wrights. There's a bunch of stuff that I'm retweeting there. There's resources where you can contribute money. If you're local to LA or New York, you can go out to a strike and bring them water, or just join people as they march around, because it helps to have support and numbers. And I have a feeling that we're going to be out there for quite a while.
And again, like Fran Drescher has always been an advocate of unions, and she even made Fran Fine someone who doesn't cross a picket line in The Nanny, which always was a really nice little shout out, it ties into almost, I think, the core of the creator's values as well. And so the Fran or the Cece, I said I was sort of I was on team Niles and Cece for a while, because like I have worked with people who have used their feminine wiles, and I find it very frustrating. I know some people who are like, hey man, like it's tough out there. Women should be able to do whatever they want. And I'm like, I don't know. It's a complicated conversation, but I don't think that it's good for, I don't think that's a good long-term plan for anyone. But so I was like, you know what? I am annoyed at Fran for getting one over on people in an unfair way.
Yeah, me too. I have to say this week I'm right there with you. Yeah, I also love a good montage. So anytime I can imagine in my life that the things I'm doing are actually just happening to a montage, I do.
Hey, that's been 2 years of this podcast, man.
It's also how I convince myself to work out every week.
Ooh, I love that. Okay.
Just in my head, I think like this is just one more scene in my workout montage. Let's
go. Okay, everybody. Thank you for listening. We hope you found this, at least part of this episode, a little informative, and maybe helps you understand like why it looks like why some whiny baby Hollywood people are striking, because I think that's the narrative that the studios are promoting. Yeah. So, okay. Have a great week, everybody, and we will see you next week.
That's right. And also like and review and subscribe and turn on notifications on Spotify podcasts and Apple podcasts for the show. Find us at Oh Mr. Chef Pod on Instagram and Twitter. And that's it. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Goodbye.
The Flushing Girl from Flushing. The nanny named Fran.
Oh, Mr. Sheffield.
Miss Fine.